First of all, I wanted to welcome all of you to our Fitchburg Historical Society spring meeting and program. We're so excited to welcome you here this afternoon. I'm Catherine Schneider, the Vice President of the Fitchburg Historical Society. Alan Tariba, our president, had some family obligations today, so isn't able to join us. Prior to our speakers, in our very interesting program that's coming up on the biking and history of biking, we have a brief yearly business meeting of the Fitchburg Historical Society. So we'll go through that very quickly. Our first item of business for our general meeting is the Secretary's report that's been prepared by Eileen Keller. We have our Secretary, and we have copies of that in the back. It's a very short report, so what I'm going to do is see if there are any changes or questions that you would have for that Secretary's report. And if not, I would ask for a motion to approve of that Secretary's report. Thank you, Carol. Second, thank you. All those in favor of approving of the Secretary's report, please say aye. Any opposed? And the report is approved. Treasurer's report, Roger Tesh is here to give us the Treasurer's report.
Hello, and I also have copies of the report at the back table. So for last year, we received $819.51. We spent $762.88, so our net income was $56.63. So right now, as of April 19th, in our accounts, BMO checking, $1,041.89. BMO savings account, $1,341.37. BMO certificate of deposit, $6,196.94. And Summit Credit Union savings account, $2,107.08. So right now, our current balance was $10,686.28 in funds. And most of our receipts were membership dues and gifts, donations. Most of our expenses were for website and stipends for speakers and a few other things. So if you have any questions.
Well, if there are no questions, then again, I would ask for a motion to approve the Treasurer's report. Thank you. Mike, second. Thank you, Tom. All those in favor? Any opposed? Treasurer's report has been accepted. And Roger would be very happy to take renewals of membership for the Fitchburg Historical Society, and we would certainly welcome new members also to the Fitchburg Historical Society. Our dues are only $10 per individual or $12 per family, so very reasonable dues for the Fitchburg Historical Society per year. Well, our next item of business is election of the Board of Directors. There are 12 board members, and each board member serves a 3-year term on a rotating basis. The 3 board members that we have who have agreed to run for re-election are Tom Hovell. Tom, you want to raise your hand? Tom's over here. And Diane Reynolds has had surgery recently, so she's not present today. And Roger Tesh, who just gave our Treasurer's report. Mike Brost. Mike, I know I saw you. There you are. Mike Brost has agreed to run to fill the 1-year term remaining from retired board member Nancy Dorman's term. So with that, introducing our slate of candidates, are there any nominations for the board from the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the slate of candidates signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Then our candidates stand elected. So congratulations. So I'd like to give, as our last item of business, I'd like to give a little summary of what the Fitchburg Historical Society has been up to this past year. We're a busy organization and try to do a lot of things in the community and for the community. In March, we presented the Irish of Fitchburg at the Oregon Area Historical Society's annual meeting. Carol and her husband were responsible for that. Our April annual meeting last year, we had Elizabeth Leith and her husband Luther, who presented 10,000 years of occupation, exploring Fitchburg's rich archaeological record. In April, the Fitchburg Historical Society and the Fitchburg Public Library had a genealogical resources program. Our October general meeting, we had Russell Horton, who presented on finding those who served military genealogy from the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. We've partnered with the city of Fitchburg on additional frames provided for the mayoral photos in City Hall. The mayor timeline history of Fitchburg that's being worked on. We have been instrumental in providing information to them and advising the Park Commission on the naming of city parks. We're housed here at the Fitchburg Library. Up here in the second floor, we have an office, and then we also have 2 display cases, one outside the Fitchburg room that Ann White takes care of regularly. And we also have a display in the Fitchburg room. The one that's been there, Eileen has provided for us very interesting display on the schools of Fitchburg, both past and current. And then religious organizations in Fitchburg, we have had display case there, and Old Time Games, which is now in the display case. We've also have provided ongoing activities. We have Facebook presence, Fact TV monthly interviews on Talking Fitchburg, and we really appreciate Fact TV doing our taping of our program today too. They do so much to collaborate with us. Our newsletter comes out thanks to Eileen, our secretary. We continue to add additions to our Fitchburg Historical website, which is, by the way, fitchburghistory.org. Please check us out regularly. We have Fitchburg Historical Society website alert emails. Archives are open to the public by request, and we've responded to numerous historical questions we receive either by email or voicemail. So we are very present in the community, and we want you to avail yourselves of the resources that we have available for you. So with that, we'll end our business part of our meeting and get on to our program. I would like to introduce our speakers today. We are so fortunate to have 2 people who are very enthusiastic about biking, and I think as we look out at the season changing and the weather looking so beautiful today, I think our thoughts turn to all those outdoor activities that we enjoy in Wisconsin. And one of those activities is biking. And we have 2 experts on biking. So we're going to talk about the history of biking in Wisconsin and then zero in on Fitchburg specifically and what Fitchburg has to offer in terms of biking and some of the historical aspect of that too. So our 2 speakers, Nick Hoffman, who comes to us from the Wisconsin Historical Society, where he works. He co-authored, the book is right here in front of me, here on the podium. He co-authored Wheel Fever, How Wisconsin Became a Great Bicycling State. So I think that's just an intriguing title. And then Steve Arnold, who is with the Wisconsin Bike Federation Board, but a very familiar face here in Fitchburg, of course, very active here and a former mayor of the city of Fitchburg, and also a very avid biker, as you will find with his enthusiasm for getting out and biking. So with no further information, I'd like to welcome then Steve and Nick.
Thank you, Catherine. I just want to start out by introducing Nick. I'm on the Bike Fitchburg board, but both Nick and I serve on the Wisconsin Bike Fed board, our statewide advocacy organization. And when I got wind via Tom Hubble and Roger Tesh of the fact that you were looking for speakers, I immediately thought of him because I had purchased and read his book many years ago, and then subsequently met him as he came onto our board. He's a Wisconsin resident. So he's going to be terrific telling us about how Wisconsin got to be number 2 in the nation in bicycle-friendly states in 2009. Unfortunately, we're not there right now. So without further ado, Nick, and then I'll take over zeroing in on Fitchburg.
Cool. All right. It's great to be with all of you this afternoon. I've got to take this off. Maybe you can get that. Oh, there we are. That easy. Okay. Yeah, my name is Nick Hoffman. Again, I'm the Administrator of Museums and Historic Sites. This is a book that continues to get new life. Jesse Gant and I, my really great friend, and I were in Indiana for a bit. I lived in Indiana, and he would come down and visit me often. And one day while we were driving around the countryside in northern Indiana, we saw a lot of Amish families who were out on carriage and on bicycles. And that really made us spark, both being 19th century historians, what was it like when Wisconsin first transitioned from carriages as primary transportation, along with, of course, ships and railroads, to bicycles? What did that look like? And we're just two, admittedly, sort of nerdy guys who are really interested in history. He went back to where he was living at the time in Milwaukee, and I stayed in Goshen, Indiana, and we just started digging deep into this history and realized that there was a massive amount of research that could be done to tell a really dynamic story because, as Steve mentioned, Wisconsin is known as a great place for riding, and we were as high as number 2. So we wanted to give that context of how that came to be. What we were surprised to find as we went deeper and deeper into the history is just how vast this was before the year 1900, up through what was called the first bike boom. So our book really focuses on that period right there. By the end of the 1890s, Wisconsin was known at the time as the leading division, I'll explain what that means in a bit, the leading division of the League of American Wheelmen. It was seen as one of the top destinations already in the 1890s for really exceptional riding and outstanding advocacy. These two things for the 1890 cyclists saw those two things going hand in hand for what makes a really great place for riding. So we have always been known really since one of those locations. So our book goes into things like the technology of bikes. We were interested in that. We were interested in learning all about some really great athletes. But what we're really focused on are things that people still grapple with cycling today. Number one, who should be allowed to ride? Back in the 19th century, this was front and center. Should women be allowed to ride? Should African Americans be allowed to ride? Native people? What does that mean for the culture and time period for that? What does it mean for women who really start to push their ways into society during this time period in really new ways and use the bicycle for change? We were really interested in those big questions. And something that we always think about today, where could people ride? So those were two issues, and it's a bit of a buzzkill for someone on the Wisconsin Bike Fed board today. Those are still the big issues. Where can people ride, especially safely? Those have been the constant questions since the very first bike ride in Wisconsin, which is what we'll get to here in a moment. So these things are legacies that we still grapple with today, and it goes all the way back to the 1810s, and that's when a machine called a draisine or hobby horse was invented. And if you saw that machine, it would look very much like a bicycle would today. This was a machine that was invented in Europe. Basically, it's a bicycle with 2 wheels, but without pedals and without gearing. And so you would straddle this, and you would essentially propel yourself forward by running with this machine between your legs. It was a really awkward machine. We know it did come into the United States, but in Europe, where so much of our bicycle innovation continued to come with for technology, they continued to play around with this. And in 1867, a man by the name of Pierre Michaud invented what we would recognize today as the modern bicycle. It was called the velocipede, meaning swift of foot. And basically, it was a machine. I'll show an image in a bit. Bicycle like we have today, but instead of having all of the chain and really, nice air-inflated rubber tires, this was a machine that was made of wood, and the pedals were on the front hub of the front wheel. And so you'd have to pedal forward without the assistance of gears or a chain or anything like that. And that's what came to the United States. It came right after the American Civil War. In 1868, that summer in Boston, New York City, all of the large parks in those cities were apparently flooded with people riding these velocipedes. And we in Wisconsin, boy, we were hungry for that technology to arrive here. We saw that as being the biggest thing. It would be like the iPhone first coming to us today. It was a modern scientific marvel. And we thought if we could get this in Wisconsin, we would be seen as a very advanced modern state, just like our eastern counterparts. So we followed this in the newspapers. I mean, people during this time period were reading all sorts of, international press. Our local newspapers were following the slow movement of the velocipede west. But people were also inventing machines in Wisconsin. This is a patent for a man from Manitowoc named Sylvester Wood. This is from 1868. Easily the first tricycle for Wisconsin. It's got some really heavy-duty pedals here. It's got a really weird rope, sort of handlebar, a turning system. But what I love best about it is from the beginning, people were thinking about how do you ride 4 seasons in Wisconsin. And so they put on detachable skis that I have no doubt would not have worked. We don't know if this machine was ever really ridden in Wisconsin. But nonetheless, people were thinking about pedal-powered machines and were really excited by what they were seeing on the East Coast. And so that brings us to January 1869. January 1869, a man by the name of Joshua Towns was spotted riding his velocipede in downtown Milwaukee. And that one singular moment, that is the arrival of what we would recognize as a bicycle today. That was the first ride in Wisconsin. Joshua Town, in the dead of winter, in a freezing January day, was seen pedaling through the city. And people celebrated this. They were so excited about this new machine coming. And we looked through all sorts of newspapers from throughout Wisconsin. And that one moment sets off a craze that was called velocipede mania, like wildfire across the state of Wisconsin. It was just one town after another, large and small. We were finding evidence of what they called velocipedestrians before the word bicyclist. But of course, it was winter, so that was a really big challenge for people riding. And so one of the things that they did is they would look to European counterparts. How are they riding in the winter, for instance? And so one of the things that they found was in big cities like Paris or London, they were riding indoors when it got to colder weather seasons. In Europe, they had these gigantic gymnasiums. In Wisconsin, after the Civil War, we really don't have that, but we still tried our best to ride indoors. And this was the first velocipede rink, that's what they were called, that we found in Wisconsin. This one right up here was called Professor Veazey's riding school, or the velocipede riding school. It was the Milwaukee skating rink. That would sit right where U.S. Cellular Arena sits in downtown Milwaukee today. So right down in the sporting district of the city of Milwaukee. And so inside this rink, you could come in, you could bring your velocipede if you were fortunate enough to own one. Not a lot of people were manufacturing them. Some people were buying them from other states. Some blacksmiths we have found throughout Wisconsin, or carriage makers, started to make them, but they were incredibly expensive. Very few people owned velocipedes. So the other thing that they did is you could rent them in this space. You can rent a velocipede and learn to ride. Imagine going into one of these places, though, and you're learning to ride from somebody who maybe had been riding a velocipede for a week, maybe a month if you were lucky. And so I'll show a slide coming up. These places were such a mess. So many people crashing. And so another thing that they would do to improve their revenue in these velocipede rinks was they would rent tickets for people to come in and just watch the chaos that was unfolding. And they found other ways to show the possibilities of the machine. This is our first image of a cyclist in Wisconsin. Technically a velocipedestrian, but this is Miss Edith Schuler, and she traveled around the Midwest. She was from Chicago. She had an extended stay at the Milwaukee riding school at Professor Veazey's rink, and she was a stunt rider. It's kind of like BMX or street riding today, where you know, or maybe like if you've seen Pee Wee Herman in the introduction to Pee Wee's Big Adventure. They would stand on their seat, they would kick their feet over the handlebars, you know, really kind of drastic stunts. But the other thing that people are paying for is she is incredibly daring. She's wearing a very short skirt with essentially pants, bloomer pants underneath it. So even seeing a woman riding, this was such a massive challenge to what the societal norms were for this time period, that in the newspaper, we would occasionally find people really questioning her riding in this rink. But nonetheless, this was a popular thing for a while. These velocipede rinks appear all over Wisconsin, generally the second story of like a Masonic lodge where they have a large room, or a small opera house in a city. This is McCourt's Hall. It was a meeting hall in downtown Oshkosh. They rode on the second floor. That was their velocipede rink. So these are buildings that are no bigger than this room. So just imagine riding a modern bicycle around in this room. Imagine riding a bicycle in here that you're riding for the very first time, and there's maybe 20 other people or so trying to scoot around in this space. It wouldn't work for us today. It wouldn't work in the past. This is another great example, Metropolitan Hall in Appleton. The second story was also where their velocipede rink was located. And here's the chaos unfolding inside one of those spaces. So the velocipede, though, it is a craze for a while. People were really excited to see it. We start to see people thinking about this machine not just as a plaything. They're really testing the ideas of it. In some cities across the United States, there are already police who are riding bicycles. There are people who are starting to experiment with it for just daily use. We actually found our first commuter in Wisconsin was either a professor or a student at Lawrence University, because the Appleton newspaper described a velocipede parked and leaning up on Main Hall, which still stands in downtown Appleton. So this was something where people were seeing the possibilities of what bicycling could become. But society was simply not ready for this. They are thinking of things like Edith Schuler wearing a short skirt, riding in public, and people were really nervous and scared about this. So letters to the editors really start to compound. They start to describe people as being mad or crazy when they're riding these machines. And the whole movement, because there's not an organization there to support it, and the societal pressure, it falls apart. The first velocipede arrives in January. We could not find another velocipede ride in Wisconsin after about May of that same year. It is just a complete peak and a really sharp valley. So what ends up happening is that in Wisconsin, the bicycle or the velocipede during this time period just totally takes a back seat. People aren't riding it. These things, we're lucky that so many are still preserved in Wisconsin. They just become these novelties in a lot of different cities, but people are just not out riding them. In Europe, people keep playing with the technology. You'll notice already that a velocipede of 1869, one of the wheels is smaller in the back than the front wheel. And so in Europe, they keep playing with that idea, and they notice that if you move the rider on top of the wheel and add that weight right on the top, and if you make that wheel really, really big, you're going to go really, really fast. And so they had this need for speed, and they could see all sorts of new possibilities for racing, for already bicycle touring during that time period. And so they were absolutely thrilled with the possibilities. It takes a while for that to actually come to the state of Wisconsin. And so in 1876, a man by the name of Albert Pope, he eventually starts Columbia Bicycles. That might be a brand that you're familiar with. Albert Pope travels to Philadelphia for a huge exposition that's happening there, and he displays these new European high-wheel bicycles. They're technically called ordinaries. So he displays these ordinaries there. Once again, we have the same thing that happens with the Velocipede. Wisconsinites are intrigued about the possibility of this coming here. This is the new big technology. It's the new version of the iPhone that's hanging out there. And so they're really eagerly anticipating when that happens. And on July 2nd, so about 3 years after, July 2nd, 1879, two men from Boston were spotted riding high wheels around Monument Square, which is still standing there in downtown Racine. And then another two men from Evanston, Illinois, later that month, decide to introduce the high wheel to the rest of the state. And they make an incredible journey from Evanston, Illinois, all the way up the coast of Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. They go to Green Lake, they go to Fond du Lac, they go to Oshkosh, and they introduce these machines to the rest of the state. It's really incredible, though. People were so excited for this new machine. They saw it as being so much more practical than that big, clunky Velocipede. They would meet these machines, these riders, in massive crowds. In Oshkosh, a hotel that was located right in the heart of downtown hosted the two riders. They displayed the Velocipede on the main floor, or the high wheels on the main floor of the hotel. The Oshkosh Orchestra was there around it, and people lined up around the block just to come in, hear the music, and see these machines in person. So it becomes incredibly popular. But these machines were wildly expensive. They're using these technologies for steel tubing, et cetera, that is just starting to take off in the United States in some big ways. So this is pretty expensive. The machines are still quite large. And so in Wisconsin, what primarily ends up happening, as is true across the United States, is that the clubs are primarily young men who have a lot of money because they're the sons of paper barons or something like that in the state, brewers, and they're kind of bored and they're really adventurous. They're daredevils because to get on this machine, for one, I bike a lot. I would never do it. I would fall over. They really cordon off the sport for just them. It's not something that anybody can purchase and ride. And furthermore, they start forming clubs. One of the earliest clubs in the state of Wisconsin is the Milwaukee Bicycle Club. There's still lineage of that club that exists today. And right from the beginning, it's a club primarily for these young men to advance the hobby mostly for themselves. And women too, because of the machine's design and because you were required to wear a long skirt in public, you're really not going to be able to ride. It'd be impossible and very dangerous with a skirt. They did have some other machines. They were even more expensive. These were basically tricycle versions of the high wheel. They had gigantic wheels in the back, usually a small wheel in the front. And women could pedal on that because their skirts would not get occupied. So this is Benjamin Foss Hooper. His spouse was a very famous suffragette, Jessie Jack Hooper. He's from Oshkosh. So one of the big lessons from that first Velocipede mania that occurred is that in order for this sport to really continue and thrive, they need to organize in some way for when that eventual societal push might come back. That early Velocipede period, there already were city ordinances that were starting to dictate where people can and cannot ride. In Appleton, for instance, there was a sidewalk ordinance that was passed in 1869 that still is in place today, that you can't bike on the sidewalk, and that has lineage all the way back to that early period. And so these men, they were really interested in building out this sport and this leisure activity. So in 1880, the League of American Wheelmen, this gigantic organization that still exists as the League of American Bicyclists, they form in 1880 by Albert Pope, the guy who I mentioned earlier who started Columbia Bicycle Manufacturing. He wants to sell more bikes, and so he figures if he can start making these clubs across the United States, it's going to increase ridership. he's going to sell a lot more bicycles. So he would send agents to sell bikes and start clubs throughout Wisconsin. And we found a couple of his agents in Wisconsin starting clubs in places like Appleton, Wisconsin, creating more clubs in Milwaukee. And eventually, these small clubs in Wisconsin start to form into a cohesive group. So in 1885, this is the Wisconsin division of the League of American Wheelmen during one of their very first annual meetings on the shores of Lake Winnebago. So that's really the birth. When we think of organizations like the Wisconsin Bike Fed, People for Bikes, a lot of those groups, they have their early starts during this time period in the 1880s. So the high wheel was certainly a machine that was more popular than the velocipede. It is a machine that was used for a little over a decade, so it had a pretty good run as far as its technology went, but it never really takes off, again, just because of all these different constraints that were being placed on it. One really big issue that it had was that not a lot of people were buying it. And so in a city like Appleton, Oshkosh, it's really hard for us to get a firm estimate, but sometimes there'll be like a big bike parade in town and they get some numbers of people. And my guess in Appleton, there were somewhere around 300 to 400 people who owned a high wheel bicycle during that time period. So again, that big mass of people are not riding. Really what comes out of that high wheel era as one of the most important things that happens is those advocacy groups really do start to form. And one of the things that they're really interested in is good roads and very safe places to ride. So being in Fitchburg, where you have all these incredible trails, you have so many great bike lanes and side paths, it's those early groups that were really pushing that in Wisconsin. We often think that it's the dairy farmers who made our great roads across the state. It goes actually back to the 1880s and the League of American Wheelmen. They were the ones who started the good road movement, and we'll have some more on that in just a bit. So in 1887, there's a very important bicycle race that happens in the state. Bicycle racing was just starting to get popular. We had an amateur bicyclist named Terry Andre. He was a part of that Milwaukee Bicycling Club. They had a racing team called the Milwaukee Wheelmen. Terry Andre was easily the best high wheel racer in Wisconsin. And you may recognize Terry Andre from Kohler Andre State Park. That is named after him, actually. Not for his bicycling, but for him in general and his many other things that he did for the state. But in one race, he rode a high wheel against someone who had a new safety bicycle, which is essentially the same bicycle that we ride today. And Terry Andre's position was real manly men rode high wheels. They thought these new machines were less than. They called them bicyclettes. They tried to feminize them because they tried to demean people who rode those new safety bicycles. They thought they were just going to be for women. And so in one race, he was racing against a guy named Parker Surcombe, who was an OK racer. And Terry Andre still won that day, but Parker Surcombe, who really had no business being that close to Terry, finishes really close in that race. And it actually was the turning point that people started to see this new technology of a safety bicycle was going to really start to transform the future of cycling in Wisconsin. And it happened so quickly. In about 3 years, the high wheel bicycle is gone, and the safety bicycle absolutely explodes. So the safety bicycle is, again, a technology that was developed in Europe. It makes its way into Wisconsin by 1887. There's some really significant changes here, though. One, manufacturing had really caught up to making a machine that was much more affordable. Just the sheer advances in tubing technology for steel. We now have rubber tires that are available. Everything's just becoming much more affordable. But one of the really key things is that we call these step-through bicycles today. A lot of people probably own that type of bicycle. This was actually designed for women's skirts to hang down while they were biking. And further, this back rear netting would then block a skirt from going back and getting caught in gears. And so a women's bicycle that was incredibly practical took off, and women and their sheer volume joining into the sport, becoming bicyclists, they saw these machines as being incredibly new for their freedoms. It's this machine and it's women who really drive the period that we're just about to enter, called the bicycle boom. This is when sales absolutely skyrocket. In fact, even today, historians look back at this period, and we've had a lot of really great peaks and valleys for bicycle sales in the United States and ridership. We still haven't come back to match this 1890s period. It explodes in Wisconsin, and one of the best examples is manufacturing. Before 1890 in the state's manufacturing, Bureau of Labor Industrial Statistics, their biennial reports, bicycling is not even listed before 1890 as an industry. By the mid-1890s, it's a top 10 industry in the state. There were manufacturers everywhere. Oregon, Wisconsin, near us, there was Badger Bicycle Company. Madison had leather saddle production. Oshkosh had small bicycle factories. Milwaukee had massive factories, Kenosha, Racine. We had bicycle companies that were making machines in bamboo. There were others that were making them in wood. It was just incredible, this huge scale. Production was just massive. In Appleton, where I worked for a while, I looked in their city directories to see, how many bike shops were in the city during this time period. There was one on almost every single block downtown. And further, the pharmacies, the groceries, all these other businesses were selling something to bicyclists, whether it was some sort of particular basket you could put on your bike or clothing being sold at a pharmacy of all places. I mean, it was just this huge capture. So the first era was known as Velocipede Mania. This era, it is truly a wheel fever. People are just obsessed with the sport. So this is just a great example of Groth Hardware Store. And bicycling takes up in Wisconsin as this incredible destination for riding. One of the things that I think Wisconsin today, certainly we're really a place that's known for hosting really great group rides. We have really nice rolling hills, paved rural roads. We're known internationally as a place for bicycling, but that really has fostered so much during this time period. Steve, in a few minutes, will talk about the growth of trails in this particular area. That's something that these 1890 cyclists were already doing. They were building side paths in some of our cities across Wisconsin. Eau Claire already had a bicycle path. It was a crushed gravel, but a bicycle path that connected some of their local cities. So already they're thinking about this during this period. But my favorite, it's not an invention for the state, but we really developed it better than most. In 1896, a man by the name of M.C. Rotier created this map. It's the bicycle road map of Wisconsin. And this is the first real detailed road map for the state. So this is an incredible thing that they were able to produce during this time period. But what it goes further, if you're a bicyclist, it's broken by region, which our maps still today are broken by region for cycling. It gives you a key. So each one of these roads, it's either a good quality road, it'll let you know that in this key, or it's flat, hilly, or like very hilly. I think it's very hilly. So you get a sense, like when you're planning out your route, where are the best ways to go? Partnered with that, a person who became mayor in Appleton in 1897, Samuel Ryan, created a tour handbook that went with this. And so it does the same thing. It tells you where are your best roads, but on top of that, it added this layer of hotels that were friendly to bicyclists all over Wisconsin. Bike shops that would give you discounts if you were a member of the League of American Wheelmen. It was this incredible network describing floral and fauna highlights along the way. It was one of our first major tour books for the state of Wisconsin. And so these two things partnered were these incredible gifts for cyclists. And we become a place where we know European cyclists were already coming over. There's a man by the name of Frank Lenz who tries to bike around the world. It's a great book called The Lost Cyclist on him. He comes to Wisconsin because he knows this infrastructure is here. It really was an incredible achievement in the 1890s. And all of these people are a part of nationally leading the Good Roads movement during this time period. And women especially saw the machine, as I've already mentioned, this was a machine of freedom for them. Because if you're a young woman, one, you probably didn't own a horse during this time period. Maybe your parents had one, so you either had to rent some sort of transportation, or just imagine being somebody, during this period and you want to go into town. You have to load up your horse, get your carriage set up. It really was a struggle every day for transportation. The bicycle offered new freedoms, especially for these young women, for instance, at Lawrence University. They could just buy a bike, and suddenly the world was unlocked to them in ways that it had never been unlocked to them before. So this is the SB Cycling Club at Lawrence University, and we've learned so much about them. They would bike through the countryside. Sometimes they would do rides wearing bloomers, so they were starting to really advocate for dress reform. So many of the women who are in this photograph actually end up becoming the leaders of their local suffrage organizations just about a decade later. So a lot of what they learned about forming their club, some of the risky, almost protest rides that they're going on because they want to wear bloomers and not have to wear skirts. It's all of these little tests that come forward for eventually setting up the suffrage movement. Frances Willard, a very famous Wisconsinite from Janesville, she actually published a book during this time period called Wheel Within a Wheel, and it's about her love for the bicycle and all of the freedoms that she saw as someone involved in temperance and suffrage. She saw the machine as being this great new freedom. And lastly, in the 1890s, while we have this incredible ridership, if we were to go to the newspapers during this time period, to the sporting section, and you went to look at the box scores, what are the big sports people are following? You're going to have baseball, boxing, horse racing occasionally. This is one of the biggest sports during this time period is bicycle racing. So the last chapter of Wheel Fever, we focused just on the bicycle racing during this time period. And Wisconsin was one of those places that was producing world-class bicycle racers. And one of the finest athletes in our state history is this man, Walter Sanger. When the Wisconsin Sports Hall of Fame was created in the 1860s, their first class included Curly Lambeau and included Walter Sanger. So at least during that time period, this was a household name. I'd love to see it that way again. So Walter Sanger was from Milwaukee. His dad owned a horse farm, and supposedly he would help break in these horses for racing by bicycling alongside them. You can see looking at him that he's kind of got a full-back body, where if I showed you an image of Terry Andre, that high-wheel racer, it's kind of this tall and lanky guy, and that's generally what they were during that period. But with this new technology, you didn't need to be tall and lanky anymore with those high-wheel bicycles. So Walter Sanger is just kind of built a little bit different than most of your bicycle racers during this time period. So in 1892, he's discovered by the Milwaukee Wheelmen. He was competing in some amateur sports. They put him on his team, and eventually he starts to win a lot of local races. He goes up to Oshkosh in 1892. There's already this big, nasty rivalry between the Milwaukee Wheelmen and the Chicago Wheelmen, so that has always been true for our state history. They meet in Oshkosh, and Walter Sanger just mops the floor with everybody. He wins all the races that he competes in that day. He is quickly picked up by a couple different sporting good companies on the East Coast. Eventually, he goes to Europe, where he ends up winning several European titles. He's a world record holder at different periods during his racing career. He is one of the greatest athletes in state history, easily. His other really big thing that comes into his career is in 1896. Walter Sanger was competing at a race in Indianapolis. And during this time period, the League of American Wheelmen were very firm on a policy that they were for whites only. It was a whites only organization, and for their racing board, they would only allow white athletes to compete in their sports. Some local tracks would allow black athletes then to compete, but they could not race head-to-head against a white cyclist. They would have to race against the best time that the pack of white cyclists had set the day before. So if you're familiar with track and field or bicycle racing today, you're not going to match the time of the pack. I mean, the pack is there. They're helping push each other. that's the fast group. To ride individually on your own and try and guess how fast you're going to try and beat the best time is unheard of. But this young man named Marshall Walter Taylor, he was racing in amateur races very locally in Indianapolis. He ends up racing a day after against Walter Sanger's best time that he set, and he absolutely crushed it. So Walter Sanger had set a track record. Major Taylor, against his time, actually beat and set a new track record. And so automatically, right away, this becomes this major fanfare. Many white cyclists, especially in the South, but also we know in Wisconsin, were absolutely opposed to the idea of Major Taylor racing against white cyclists. But he had put them in a spot where he really was seen as the fastest athlete that was out there. So in places like Wisconsin, we know he raced in Green Bay. He tried to race in Racine. They refused to race against the black cyclists there. He does race in Janesville. And then there's a couple other attempts that he's able to race in the state. But he really overcomes this very firm barrier to a point where through special permits, he was allowed to race against white cyclists north of the Mason-Dixon line. But he was frustrated with that. I mean, who wouldn't be? That is ridiculous that he wasn't allowed to race in the South and consistently across the North. And so he ends up going to Europe, where he is easily known as the greatest cyclist in world history. Lance Armstrong, when he was at his peak, occasionally would go up on the podium wearing a T-shirt with actually a version of this image on his T-shirt to remind people of just how great Major Taylor was. There is really... we have had so many great cyclists, but Major Taylor is standing atop alone. So in the 1890s, as the bicycle boom is continuing to pick up steam, there is a period where there's overproduction. The bicycle companies with that big boom thought they could keep pushing out bikes, but a lot of bikes sat in warehouses. Sometimes on whole train cars would not get unloaded in different cities in Wisconsin. So, people were riding, but they weren't buying anymore. And at the same time that's happening, a new technology comes on board, which is the horseless carriage. And this photograph says it all. It's a horseless carriage in front of what was a bicycle shop, Ballard's Bicycles in Oshkosh. And the League of American Wheelmen, this was actually described in a review in the Wisconsin Bike Fed magazine. The League of American Wheelmen, by 1899, their magazines, their communications, completely push aside bicycles. They are now focused on the automobile as this new great technology. And what was the good roads movement for bicycles shifts over to being the good roads movement for automobiles. The whole organization just pivots right into automobiles. And so this picks up steam. Automobiles become the craze. It takes a while for them to be able to be mass produced, but the bicycle just completely starts to fall out of favor. There are some peaks and valleys. During World War I, for instance, Harley-Davidson starts manufacturing bicycles, but for a very long period, the bicycle was viewed as a child's toy. There's always these little peaks of interest that go up, but it stays consistently that way for quite a while until the 1960s. There's a lot of different things that are happening across the United States, but in the 1960s, in Wisconsin, we become the nation's leader for a new movement that was born out of Illinois for rails to trails. And the Elroy-Sparta Trail was put into place in 1967, right as we're about to go into a huge oil crisis. So while there was a huge dip in interest in cycling, the oil crisis starts to bring it back up. That's one of the peaks of bicycling during that time period, is right during 1973. So we have all this interest all of a sudden in bicycling again. So it's no surprise that right after that, a company locally wants to make bikes in the United States, because so many of our bikes at that time were overseas. And so 3 years after the oil crisis, Trek Bicycle Corporation is formed in 1976, and interest just keeps ramping up for there. The Bike Fed, Wisconsin Bike Fed, is formed in 1988. So just like we had in that early period, there's now this big lobby group that's starting to organize cyclists and think about how we continue to expand this idea of rails to trails, safe roads, safe cycling throughout the entire state of Wisconsin. So that, I think, brings us right on up to Fitchburg. Sure.
I'm curious about the velocipedes in the second floors of these riding halls.
Yeah.
Are those wooden wheels on wooden floors?
Wooden wheels with an iron edge out. So just like, think how noisy that had to be. Yes. I have seen some people who have like either restored early velocipedes or have made their own. Like at Old World, Wisconsin, occasionally there'll be velocipede riders there. Incredibly loud. You can hear them coming down the road a good distance away.
That was great. Thanks very much. I got to get online here. We good? All right. So I'm going to go way back. I first want to talk about some of the natural advantages that Fitchburg had to becoming a great bicycling city. So in 22,000 years ago, the Wisconsin glaciation reached its greatest extent. And as you know, a glacier is a conveyor belt of gravel and sand and boulders and stuff that constantly moves forward with the ice and then melts at the leading edge of the glacier. And during the period between 22,000 and 15,000 years ago, the melting was balanced by refreshed ice from its source. And so the margin of the glacier was stable. And that caused great ridges to build up. And this formed what we now call the Johnstown Moraine, the terminal moraine of the Wisconsin Glacier. And here is Fitchburg. And you can see that the Johnstown Moraine is right here. And if you're not a student of glacial topography and you want to see what it looks like, a great place to see it is at Badger Prairie Park on County Highway PB. Some years later, some thousands of years later, the glacier receded, but again stabilized here and formed what we call the Milton Moraine. These are named for cities that they go through. And so you can see in Fitchburg, it comes in around where Seminole Highway crosses the belt line and comes down, comes through Seminole Forest and up over the Burnwood Hill that we're on right south of us here where I live, and continues down. And so in between are bogs and wetlands and alluvial plains and very varied topography that makes biking around here so beautiful and satisfying and interesting. So we have, on a bicycle, you're traveling at a speed where you can cover a lot of ground, 12 or 20 miles in an hour, yet you're going slow enough and you're completely exposed to your environment so that you can appreciate the wildlife and the vistas and all the details of the scenery. And so Fitchburg is right in the middle of this geological jumble that is so interesting to drive or ride or walk through. Jumping forward many years, the next natural advantage we have is the fact that Madison was a railroad hub in the golden age of railroading. Again, you can see Fitchburg. You can see our 3 rail lines. This one is still active today, but the Illinois Central and the Chicago and Northwestern, which cross here at what will become the Velo Underground, are later abandoned and become rail trails, as Nick mentioned. And so that is our second natural advantage, is that we have these 2 unused railroad corridors that go through Fitchburg. So that brings us to our state trails. And the Military Ridge was the first. It ran across the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad corridor along the Military Ridge. It was in the late, I think it was 83, that it opened west of Fitchburg. In Fitchburg in the late 80s, the creation of a frontage road along the Verona Road on the east side allowed it to be extended up to Fitchburg to the frontage road. And it was allowed cyclists to come from Verona and all the way from Dodgeville into Fitchburg and Madison. I try to remember all these dates, but I'm not going to remember them all. But during the Verona Road project, the trail was rerouted back to the railroad bed. And so you can see McKee Road is here and a bridge over McKee Road that opened in 2014. This is local jurisdiction, which we'll talk about more. From here south, from the DNR trailhead, south and west to Verona, is run by the DNR. And so that was our first state trail. Our second was the Capital City State Trail, not a rail trail. It starts at the Verona Frontage Road that you can see here and goes down toward Dunn's Marsh and through the Velo Underground, along with every other trail, and which you see here. So this is looking southeast from the area around the Arrowhead Pond, and this is the Badger State Trail overhead. And so we're and this is the if you go this way, you'll go to Verona and the Military Ridge Trail. So we came through here, and it continued across the city and goes out into the town of Blooming Grove, continues east to Lake Farms Park, and then north into the city of Madison, around Lake Monona, and ends on the northwest side of Lake Monona, where we hopefully will get it connected to the Glacial Drumlin Trail someday. Interesting origin that it runs through east of the, from the roundabout east, it runs through the Dane County E-Way. And that's generally along Nine Springs Creek. And that's a very important route for the Madison Metropolitan Sewer District. And so during this time, the sewer district was developing a line to pump effluent, treated water, back into the Verona watershed, to the Badger Mill Creek watershed, where the sewage would naturally drain from southwest Madison and Verona. So when you pump it over the hill over to the Nine Springs plant, you're supposed to replace that water back into the watershed. And so a lot of the Capital City State Trail is a sewer trail built along the construction road of the Nine Springs Interceptor and the effluent return line back to the Badger Mill Creek watershed. You can see down here, this is the easternmost end near East Clayton Road, just before we leave Fitchburg into the town of Blooming Grove. Our third state trail is the Badger State Trail. It starts at the Velo Underground. Right here is the bridge over that we just saw from below a couple minutes ago. From that point north and east is Madison's southwest path. That goes up to Camp Randall and then curves around and tees at the Cap City Trail at Lake Monona by Monona Bay. And from here south, it goes to Illinois. It follows the Illinois Central Railroad bed to the state line, and there becomes the Jane Addams Trail and continues on to the city of Freeport, Illinois. It is, interestingly, a rail bank. It's owned by the Department of Transportation for the possible future use as and again as a rail line. And so things like when we built the bridge over McKee Road on the Badger State Trail, the bridge had to be offset so that it wouldn't be in the way of a future rail line if one were to rail service to be restored again. You can see here, this is the opening during peak COVID of the bridge across the McKee Road. This was the 4th press conference I attended at this site. The first was to lament in 2006 or so that funding for the completion of the Badger State Trail in Fitchburg was going to be delayed for yet another biennium. Later, we met there again to celebrate the opening of the trail in Fitchburg and the paving and all the bridges that had to be redone. Again, when we installed the rectangular rapidly flashing beacons, the lights at the at-surface crossing of McKee Road, and then finally for the bridge. Many of you in this room might have been at this event. We unveiled the historical marker in the historic hamlet of Fitchburg on Went Road along the Badger State Trail, which you can see there at the bottom. And then this is typical scenery along the rural part of the trail in southern Fitchburg. People always wonder, they get to the Welcome to Fitchburg sign on the Badger State Trail, and it doesn't look any different than, the town of Verona that they just left. Another view of the Velo Underground, the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad continued from that DNR trailhead east, and it took an intergovernmental agreement between Madison and Fitchburg to build the first 5 stages of the continuing trail along that corridor. This area is called the Military Ridge Path. In about 2018, during the development of the Dane County Bicycle Wayfinding Manual, Fitchburg and Madison adopted a convention that they will name bicycle facilities through the woods that do not require state trail passes, paths, and those that did, trails. And so you will see that the Military Ridge and Cannonball paths and Madison's Southwest Path follow that convention, as do our Badger State Trail, Military Ridge, and Capital City State Trail, which all require trail passes. Now, other jurisdictions do not follow that convention. So we have, for example, the Oregon Rotary Trail on our southern border that was developed by the Village of Oregon, is called a trail, but it does not require, it is named a trail, but it does not require a trail pass. And the Lower Yahara River Trail to McFarland is a Dane County Parks facility, and they don't follow that convention, so they called it a trail. But that's why we have a Military Ridge Path down to the DNR trailhead, where it becomes the Military Ridge State Trail and DNR jurisdiction. In the other direction, from here, leading this way up to the northeast, is the Cannonball Path, and that runs along the Harlan Hills neighborhood and the Grady tract of the UW Arboretum, and then between the Arbor Hills and the northern neighborhoods of Fitchburg. And at this point, it crosses Post Road into Madison. That's Leopold School. And barely visible in the distance is the white bridge that crosses the Beltline. The current phase ends at Fish Hatchery Road. You may have read in the news about problems with the Commissioner of Railroads trying to get the last phase done between Fish Hatchery Road and Post Road, but we can talk about that another time. This is the innovative Shred to School single track facility to get kids interested in biking to Leopold School. There is a partnership between Madison Parks and Capital Off-Road Pathfinders, now called Corp Trails, to build mountain bikes facilities around Madison to get kids more interested in the sport of mountain biking, and this was one of their first projects. We have had a series of bicycle and pedestrian plans which guide Fitchburg's, the city of Fitchburg's investments and policies on biking and walking. When I came to the council in 2005, I inquired about our bike and pedestrian plan, and that there had been one that was adopted in 2000, had been finished in 2000, but never adopted by the council. So I said, well, we need a bike and pedestrian plan. Council agreed and funded a consultant to develop our first bike and ped plan in 2008. Then in 2015, we were getting ready to apply for our second round of Bicycle Friendly Community Award, and we needed an update. We were overdue for an update of our bike and ped plan, and at that time, we created our current bike and ped plan, adopted in 2017. Currently, our Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission are working on updating that plan to current, putting aside what's been done and moving it over to existing conditions and taking care of what we know to be the best practices now in the development of bike infrastructure and policies. Over the years, Fitchburg has developed many new neighborhoods, and we have adopted, first our Chamber of Commerce and later our city government has adopted bicycling as part of Fitchburg's identity. And we recognize the importance of bicycle facilities both for transportation and recreation. And we have built many new neighborhoods. Oops. Some of the most recent down here, this is High Ridge Reserve. Over here is Hartung Fields. And you can see the blue lines are all bicycle facilities. And our neighborhood plans and our comprehensive development plans, as they're approved, require developers to put in proper bicycle facilities, just like they put in proper pedestrian facilities, sidewalks and crosswalks, and proper roads. And likewise, as Fitchburg, the urban part of Fitchburg expands into the rural part and roads are converted from rural to urban roads, and as our older roads are updated and reconstructed for current conditions, we often provide better bicycle facilities. And we have established over time an amazing network of bicycle facilities. You can see on this slide, violet represents those state facilities that we already talked about. And blue represents local facilities under the jurisdictions of Fitchburg and, for example, up here, Madison. This is Madison's part of the Cannonball Path. Bike Fitchburg has proposed that this over 50-mile system be designated the Fitchburg Greenway system and promoted as a system for transportation and recreation. And the blue highlights show the longer trails that Bike Fitchburg is proposing be named and included in this system. You can see, for example, the Terra Vesa Greenway around one of our newest neighborhoods. The longest is the Fish Hatchery Greenway, which was extended from High Ridge Trail to the Beltline Frontage Road as part of the Fish Hatchery Road project. But it goes all the way to Whalen Road, 4.2 miles. Lacey Greenway extends all the way across the city, although there are points that are missing and that are proposed to be filled later. This section right here, between the middle school and the Seminole Highway around, well, actually here, Wayfair Drive, that section is programmed and will be finished soon. Likewise, this area here along Seminole Highway, we call this the Seminole Greenway from the Cannonball Path all the way to Hop House today, but soon down to the Seminole Lacey Roundabout. So this is the Fitchburg Greenway system, world class. If you want to see how world class it is, look at it in a bigger context. This is south central Wisconsin, and Fitchburg is here. And you can see that our system rivals that of Madison and far exceeds what Sun Prairie has going. Verona, this is a Madison path, but this is Verona, this is Oregon. This is Middleton's system. Middleton, Verona, Oregon, and those three are all bronze bicycle-friendly communities. Last year, Sun Prairie got promoted to silver along with us, but we've got the path system to beat them all. And that's along with all our local roads, which are suitable for bicycling. And the most important part of our path system is that part along our busy roads where it's not safe to bike or at least comfortable along with the motor vehicles. Fitchburg is a leader in another area. We call the kinds of neighborhoods that used to be built before World War II traditional urbanism. And you can see that kind of thing in Madison in the Vilas and Monroe Street neighborhoods, along Willie Street and Jennifer Street, where you have mixed use, relatively high density. People can get their daily needs at commercial sites nearby. New urbanism is a movement that started in the 90s that I'm a proponent of, that says we need to build neighborhoods like that, except they have to accommodate the car better than those old neighborhoods. So that's new urbanism. And Fitchburg is a leader in new urbanism by adopting a development and zoning code called the SMART Code that codes for new urban style neighborhoods, either traditional neighborhoods like Terra Vesa or transit-oriented neighborhoods like Uptown and North Park in our city. The SMART Code is an open source zoning code. That means it's available in the public domain for anybody to use. There's an ecosystem of consultants that will help communities adopt it to their own needs. And we did that, adopting the SMART Code in 2010. And like open source computer software, there are apps or modules or add-ons to the SMART Code. And one of them is called the bicycle module. And the bicycle module allows you to build good bicycle facilities where SMART Code areas hit busy streets or traditional suburban, conventional suburban development. And so we adopted the bicycle module along with our SMART Code. We are the first community in the world to adopt a SMART Code. Out of hundreds who have adopted the SMART Code, we are the first in the world to adopt the bicycle module. Another way that Fitchburg is a world leader. The SMART Code led us to the building in Uptown of our cycle tracks. Now, what is a cycle track? A cycle track is a dedicated bicycle facility. We are very familiar with our bike paths like the one right below the window here. But they are mixed-use paths for walkers and bicyclists and those on rollerblades or with baby carriages. But a cycle track is for cycles only, and so they can only be built where you have sidewalks nearby. And so these are. This is the cycle track. This gray concrete is a door zone area to allow people in parked cars to alight and to protect the cyclists from opening car doors. This is called the furniture zone, where you can have bike parking, benches, sandwich signs, street trees, street signs, and then of course your sidewalk and the frontage of the building. So that's our cycle tracks, and you can see them again here down by the Lacey Road roundabout. And this is our another SMART Code community. This is Terra Vesa. Now, SMART Code codes for streets where bikes and cars can safely coexist. And so here you don't have as much traffic as you do on the other side of the interchange here on Lacey Road. And so we have parking and conventional bike lanes. That's what I wanted to say about that. Now I want to switch a minute to bicycle advocacy. Already mentioned by Nick. Bike advocacy, like advocacy for health or education or the handicapped, organizations exist to promote these causes. In this case, better bicycling, better policies, and better investment in infrastructure. But because the government is so involved in bicycle infrastructure particularly, but also bicycle policies like laws and ordinances, that bicycle advocacy is organized by levels of government. So the League of American Wheelmen, which became the League of American Bicyclists in 1994, we call them the Bike League, they lobby Congress and the President's administration for better biking. The Bicycle Federation of Wisconsin, founded in '88 and rebranded as the Wisconsin Bike Fed, that's the board that both Nick and I are on. We lobby the legislature and the governor for better rules and better investment. And in our city, we have a local bike advocacy organization. We were organized 2015 as Fitchburg Bicycle Advocates, but we incorporated as Bike Fitchburg, Inc. in 16. And we are a nonprofit like the other two. And so in less than 2 weeks, we'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary. We lobby Madam Mayor and the City Council to do the right thing. And thankfully, they are very cooperative with us. So we also have specialized organizations like the Mountain Bike organization and Capital Off-Road Pathfinders, rebranded this year as Corp Trails. They also have a national organization called IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association. Yes.
Explain that these are not government groups.
Yep, they're nonprofits. Yep. So Bicycle Friendly America is a program of the Bike League, the National Bike League, and it has components to recognize bicycle-friendly communities, bicycle-friendly businesses and universities. You apply to these and get evaluated. They also rank the states and DC for their bicycle-friendly states ranking. There's two main aspects of them. One of them is recognition for good things you've done, and this is why the Chamber of Commerce gets excited about, getting these kinds of bests. And the other is a roadmap to do better. And the advocacy organizations work very hard in both of these things, both promoting what we've done well and saying, look, here's where we could improve. And so Fitchburg has been on a road to become a bicycle-friendly community since I first asked to be a reviewer of our 2012 application. I had no idea. But Christy Goforth, this lady, at the time was the communications specialist for our chamber. She's gone on to be the executive director of the Oregon Chamber and then the East Madison and Monona Chamber of Commerce. But now she runs Bikes for Kids Wisconsin. But we learned that she had done our bicycle-friendly application, and this is us celebrating our Bronze Award in 2012 at the Green Bridge over Fish Hatchery Road. Later, we applied again. The awards are for 4 years, so if you want to maintain your status or improve it, you do need to reapply. And so in 2014 through 2015, we convened a group called the Active Living Work Group and met for a year. It was Dane County, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and 6 Dane County cities, which all worked, their representatives for a year on their bicycle-friendly community applications. And we went through the pillars of bicycle-friendly communities, which were engineering, encouragement, education, enforcement, and evaluation and planning. So we went through all the topics and had outside speakers and educated ourselves. Then when we went through all those topics again, learning, discussing what we could do to improve and figuring out what we had done that was great, that we wanted to talk about in our applications. We all applied at the same time. We got national notice for this regional approach. We all got awards. It was very fun. In 2019, we did it again. I was representing the Bike Fed at that time, and so the mayors of Sun Prairie and Madison were getting awards. Julie, I think you were the president of the council at that time, and accepted for Fitchburg, and this is the representative for Verona. And then again, we applied on our own for the first time back in 2023, and each of these times we got a silver award, and I'll speak more to that in a minute. But Daryl is the president of Bike Fitchburg, and Alder Bill and the mayor got the award from me representing the Bike Fed at the time. So history of our bicycle city bodies. I named an ad hoc committee when I was mayor to be the steering committee for our first bicycle, our renewal of our bicycle and pedestrian plan. Ad hoc committees are temporary for a specific purpose, so that went away. But in 2018, the council deemed to have a bicycle committee, so that was established by ordinance. And last year, the committee was promoted to a commission, reporting to the council instead of the plan commission, and pedestrian matters were added to their portfolio. So we've been stuck at silver now for 10 years, and what? Yeah, we formed in 2018 a task force between the chamber and the city and Bike Fitchburg to get to gold. And one of the first things we did was abolish our bicycle registration requirement. That's deemed, not in our community, but in some communities, a barrier to biking because police will stop sometimes minorities and ask them for why their bicycle isn't registered. So we got rid of that. We instead now, for bicycle lost and stolen bicycle recovery, we as a city recommend that people use the national nonprofit online registries. The Bike League wants to know for gold if the things you're doing are starting to move the needle on your mode share, the percentage of people biking, and your the number of bike trips per day. And so we started counting traffic. And the city bought infrared traffic counters that are deployed around our trails. The city and Bike Fitchburg have AI-enabled counters that are counting all modes on Lacey Road and McKee Road. And Bike Fitchburg continues to do manual bike counts, several events a year. We have stepped up our bike education. We're working with all our school districts to try to get them to teach more biking as part of their curriculum. We have several of Fitchburg residents, board members, now league cycling instructors, so we're certified to teach bicycling and bicycle safety. And last year we hosted an LCI seminar to certify new league cycling instructors here in Fitchburg. And this year we're going to be teaching smart cycling. That's the curriculum that we're certified to teach through Fitchburg Recreation. We've already talked about the upgrading of our Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission and our bike and pedestrian plans. And there is a proposal to the city to recognize our path system as the Fitchburg Greenway system and to start to market it and promote it as a system and have identification and wayfinding signage. And the last thing we would like to do, and And we say here in the society that history is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. This is a tomorrow thing, but we know that we need a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator on city staff to coordinate all aspects of bicycling across departments like public works, police, parks, and so on. So this is our journey to gold. We'd like to do that. We hope for your support. And I want to acknowledge, now where did I put it? I want to acknowledge Society member Tom Hovell and Fitchburg Planning Director Emeritus Tom Hovell for this amazing history of Fitchburg's bicycle paths that you can read on the Society website. So that's a great thing. It's about 15 pages. And Nick and I will both take questions for any remaining time that we have. Yes?
What about B-cycle?
Oh, that's supposed to be on that list. Thank you. Yes, so Bike Fitchburg and the city and the chamber all worked very hard to expand the Madison B-cycle bike share system to Fitchburg. We are up to 18 stations. There are a few more yet to place for the Transportation Alternatives Grant that the city received from USDOT, and so we'll continue to do that. The B-cycle management is just amazed at how popular B-cycles are in Fitchburg, where our stations are off the charts. So we've done very, very well with supporting that system. Daryl.
Two issues that comes up.
I'll give you one, then I'll come back to you.
How the different modes of transportation mix together on the city streets.
Yep.
And I know when bicycles first came out, there's issues with bicycles and horses and pedestrians. And now there's bicycles and cars. And so there is a history behind that. So how are things adapting?
Well,
And considering that a lot of bicycles are being electrified, how that's going to change?
we could talk all day on that, but I will say that speed kills. And so it's not actually not speed, but the difference in speed. And so this is why we say don't ride on the wrong side of the road, because if you're going 10 miles an hour and somebody's coming at you at 30, that's a closing speed of 40 miles an hour. Whereas if someone's overtaking you at 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, and you're going 10, the difference is only 20 miles an hour. So ride on the right side of the road. The busier things are, the more you need to separate the speeds. So that's why multi-use paths are great in Fitchburg, because we do not have as much traffic as you do, say, at Monona Terrace. Monona Terrace is one of the few places where we have a separate cycle track and a pedestrian way. Likewise, out at the Timmins Lakeshore Path, for a long portion of it, there's separate cycling and pedestrian ways because it's so busy there. When the capacity becomes high, you need to separate those modes. For people biking on the street, at 25 miles an hour and not very busy roads, mixed traffic is usually fine. But as you get to busy roads, you need bike lanes, designated separate space. And we say that it's comfortable on 25 miles an hour without bike lanes. At 30 miles an hour, we need bike lanes. And at 35 miles an hour, we need buffered bike lanes, so more space, like the buffered bike lanes we have up by the community center going east. All right, I'll take one more. Go ahead, Adrian.
When you're riding along on the trail, are there points where you can make contact with the outside world if you're having problems? Or do you have to carry your own cell phone to make sure that you can be reached?
This probably is not the history of biking, but it's best to have a cell phone with you or ride with someone else. That would be my recommendation. Obviously, when you have a road crossing or you're going along a road, people can see when you're in trouble. But if you're out biking alone, then you need to be self-supported, and that means that you need to be fit enough and comfortable enough to be on your bike by yourself and take along a flat kit, and again, I would always recommend a cell phone these days. All right, I guess we're over.
Well, I would like to just say a very special thank you to Nick for that wonderful and interesting history of bicycling in Wisconsin, and for Steve taking us into Fitchburg in such a very deep dive into how the bicycling works here in our town and the advocacy that's going on here. So thank you both so much. Let's give them a round of applause.